The train departed at 11:14 p.m. There were 2 people in the compartment. One of them would not survive until morning. Investigators would spend 6 days figuring out exactly how it was done. The forensic chemist 4 more, and when the answer finally came, one of the department's most experienced crime scene analysts would say, quietly, almost to himself, "I've been doing this for 22 years. I've never seen anything like this." It all started with a thermos, an ordinary metal thermos filled with coffee. Victor Lane set his alarm for 6:43, not 6:45, not 6:40, 6:43. His wife once asked why. He said, "Round numbers make you complacent." 46 years old, CFO of a logistics holding company, a man who had a route for every morning, a plan for every trip, and a thermos he washed immediately after coming home. Not later, not tomorrow, immediately. Victor traveled by night train roughly once every 2 months, always the same route, from the city to the regional center, where the company's second office was located. Always the same compartment, lower right bunk, window seat. Always brought his thermos, dark, matte, half-liter capacity. Inside, coffee he brewed at home before leaving, strong, no sugar, a small amount of milk. He drank the first cup roughly 40 minutes after departure. That was a habit too. Few people knew about this habit. His secretary, his wife, and one other person, someone he had worked with for about a year. Someone who had ridden this same train, in this same compartment, more than 10 times with him. Someone named Marco Sellers. Conductor Anna Reed remembered that night, not because something had gone wrong, but because everything had gone too right. "The train was almost empty," she told investigators 2 days later. "Holiday period. Everyone had already left town. In our car, only 3 of the 8 compartments were occupied." Victor Lane entered the car at 11:08 p.m., nodded to her, showed his ticket, walked to his compartment. A few minutes later, the second passenger came in. Anna didn't remember his face. She was looking at her phone. She only remembered the jacket. Dark green, with a hood. "Were they acquainted?" the investigator asked. "I don't know. They didn't speak in front of me, but—" She paused. "I walked past the compartment about half an hour after departure. The door was slightly open. I heard a fragment of something. Something like, 'You know what this is for?' I thought they were just talking. Maybe about work. Maybe about money. I didn't think anything of it." She didn't think anything of it. That decision would haunt her for a long time. At 6:47 a.m., when the train arrived at the final station and the conductor went to wake the remaining passengers, the door to compartment number 4 did not open from inside. Anna knocked again. Then again. Then she slid the door open herself. Victor Lane was lying on the lower bunk, to all appearances, asleep. Face calm, arms at his sides, the blanket neatly pulled up to his chest. The thermos stood on the table, lid firmly closed. Next to it, an empty cup. The upper bunk was empty. The pillow was crumpled, but the bed hadn't been made up. As if someone had simply sat there for a while and then left. Anna shook Victor by the shoulder. He was cold. The first theory was predictable. Heart. Victor Lane didn't look like someone who took care of himself. Slightly overweight, a high-stress job. Age, 46, not critical, but no longer young. The paramedic who arrived at the station examined the body, looked at the posture, the calm expression on the face, the way the arms lay neatly. "Most likely in his sleep," he said. "Cardiac arrest. Quick. Painless." His wife, called at 8 in the morning, was silent for several seconds, then said only one word. No. Not because she didn't believe the diagnosis, because she knew. Victor had had 3 medical checkups in the past year. The last one, 2 weeks ago. The cardiologist had said, heart like a 30-year-old's. That was why the case wasn't closed immediately. Detective Daniel Kane took it on the 3rd day. He was 41, and in his career, he had seen enough deaths to be able to distinguish quiet obviousness from quiet wrongness. Something wasn't right here. He couldn't put his finger on exactly what, just a feeling. Experienced investigators call it professional itch. Kane requested a full toxicological screening. Standard panel? Negative. Nothing. Extended panel? Negative. Nothing again. Close it, his department head told him. Heart. The family has agreed to an autopsy. The pathologist confirms acute cardiac arrest. You have no evidence, no cause of action. Kane closed the folder, put it on the table, and still didn't close the case. Because the thermos wouldn't let him go. Here's what was bothering him. The thermos was cold, not just cooled down, cold, as if the coffee inside had never been hot. Kane pulled the conductor's statement again. Anna Reed had last seen Victor Lane alive at 11:52 p.m. She was carrying tea to the next compartment and caught a glimpse of him through the slightly open door. He was sitting, holding a cup in his hands, looking out the window. The thermos was standing on the table, open. Kane thought, there's the answer. The thermos had been standing open for 7 hours. It cooled down. That explains it. He almost closed the folder. Almost. The train arrived at the final station at 6:47 a.m. When Anna found the body, the thermos was closed, lid firmly screwed on. Someone had closed it after Lane drank his coffee, or Lane had closed it himself before lying down. But in that case, the thermos couldn't have gone cold in 7 hours. A quality sealed metal thermos holds temperature for 8 to 10 hours. Something didn't add up. Kane called a physicist at the Technical University. Explain the situation. The physicist listened in silence, then said briefly, if the thermos was sealed and still went cold, there was something inside it that was actively absorbing heat. Or someone had deliberately modified it. Kane hung up and called the forensic chemist. Elena Voss had worked in the forensic chemistry department for 19 years. Kane brought her the thermos and 3 milliliters of dried liquid scraped from the bottom of the cup. Look for something that wouldn't come up in a standard screening, he said. Something that activates when heated. Voss looked at him over her glasses. A thermolabelide toxin? I don't know what it's called. I'm just telling you what I think. She worked for 4 days. Kane called her on the 2nd day, the 3rd, the 4th. Each time she answered briefly, not finished yet. On the 5th day, she called him. Come in. When Kane walked into the lab, Voss was standing at the table with printouts of chromatographic analyses. Her expression was the one people have when they found what they were looking for, and are now not entirely sure they wanted to find it. You were right, she said. There was a substance, natural origin, in its pure form, undetectable by standard methods. But here's the interesting part. She showed him one of the graphs. Above 60 degrees Celsius, this substance transitions into its active form. Below 40 degrees, it's stable, practically inert. Do you understand what that means? Kane understood. It means in cold coffee, it doesn't work. Exactly. In cold coffee, it's just an organic molecule that does nothing. But once the coffee heats up to the temperature of a normal hot drink, it activates. It acts on cardiac conduction, quickly, Invisibly, the external presentation. Acute cardiac arrest. She paused. The dose was precisely calculated. Not to kill immediately. To kill within 20 to 30 minutes. When the person has already drunk, already lain down, already drifting off to sleep. To make it look like death in sleep. Kane stared at the graphs. This wasn't an accident, he said. No, this wasn't an accident. Whoever did this knew chemistry, knew how much was needed, knew that standard screenings would miss it, and knew one very important thing. That the victim drank his coffee hot, said Kane. Exactly. Marco Sellers was 43 years old when Kane first called him. At the first interrogation, Kane offered him coffee. Sellers accepted. When the cup was brought, he didn't touch it. He simply held it in his hands and watched the steam rise from it. Then the steam disappeared. The cup cooled. He never drank. Kane noted this, didn't write it down, just noted it. Did you know Victor Lane? Yes. We worked together for about a year. Did you often take this train? A few times, for work. Were you on the train that night? A pause. Exactly 1 second. No, I was home. Kane made a note. 1 second. Marco Sellers' biography, on closer examination, turned out to be the biography of a man who had been unlucky around Victor Lane. 3 years ago, they had led a major contract together. Something went wrong. The details in the documents were murky, but the substance was this. The contract failed, and officially, Sellers was held responsible. He lost his position. Victor Lane stayed. Marco found another job, then another. From the outside, everything looked fine, but people who had known them both said the same thing. Sellers hadn't forgotten. He never talked about it directly, a former colleague of both told Kane. But when Victor's name came up, something changed. Not in his face, in the way he held the pause, as if each time he decided again, say something or not, and each time he decided, not. Kane requested surveillance camera footage from the train station, platform, waiting area, train entrances. On the recording at 11:06 p.m., 2 minutes before Victor Lane entered the car, a camera captured a man in a dark green hooded jacket. He was standing at the edge of the platform with his back to the camera. When boarding began, he turned and walked toward the car. His face was partially hidden by the hood, but the height, the build, the characteristic way of holding his left shoulder slightly higher than his right. Kane showed the recording to 3 people who had known Sellers personally. All 3 said the same thing. Now, with the substance and the suspect known, the main question arose. How? Victor Lane's thermos was his own. He took it from home. He brewed the coffee himself. Sellers couldn't have approached him at the station and added something. They hadn't seen or spoken to each other that evening. At least, not publicly. Voss explained this in her second report. The substance could have been added to the thermos in advance, not to the coffee, to the thermos itself. On the inner surface, on the rubber gasket under the lid, on the metal base. In its inert state, it has no color, no smell, no taste. On contact with hot liquid, it transitions to its active form and dissolves. When could this have been done? A few hours before the trip, or earlier. The substance is stable at room temperature indefinitely. Kane went back to Sellers' biography and found what he was looking for. 3 weeks before Victor Lane's death, Lane had hosted a small work gathering at his home. Several people, informal setting. Sellers hadn't been there. They hadn't spoken officially in a long time. But one of the guests that evening remembered. Shortly before the gathering started, a car had pulled up to Lane's building. The driver got out, buzzed the intercom. The owner wasn't home. He'd been held up at the office. The driver waited a few minutes by the entrance and left. The concierge at Lane's building confirmed. That day, a package arrived addressed to Victor. Small. He had picked it up himself when he came home that evening, and added, remembering, one of the residents that evening had held the building door open. Someone was walking toward them, carrying a bag. The package was found in a garbage bin in the basement. A box, wrapping paper, and a handwritten note. Was thinking of you. Glad you're doing well. M. Nothing else was in the box. It was a pretext, Kane said at the briefing. A pretext to enter the building, or to wait for a moment when someone could follow another resident in. Lane had an open shelf in the entryway. His wife confirmed it. The thermos always sat there, ready for the next trip. A pause. Sellers knew the routine, knew the thermos was always in that spot between trips, knew when the next trip was. He didn't need much time. But one question continued to trouble Kane. Why had Sellers even gotten on that train? The poison was already in the thermos. The victim would have died without his presence. Why take the risk? Why end up in the same compartment as the person you're killing? Kane thought about it for a long time, then arrived at the answer that seemed to him the only possible one. Sellers wanted to see. Not the death. No, it wouldn't have come to that. The poison worked slowly. But he wanted to be there one last time. He wanted to say the words that had kept him awake for 3 years. He wanted Victor Lane to understand. Not in court, not through lawyers, but like this, at 4 in the morning in a quiet compartment, exactly what was happening and why. You know what this is for? Anna Reed had only heard the end of the phrase. Kane thought about that phrase for several days. What had come before it? What had Sellers said to Lane during those hours while the train moved through the darkness? That question would never be answered. Victor Lane had taken it with him. And Sellers, at the interrogations, was silent, steady, methodical, with that same 1-second pause before each answer. Marco Sellers was arrested 3 weeks after Victor Lane's death. The evidence base was assembled carefully, layer by layer. The station surveillance recording. Testimony from 3 people who identified him by his distinctive posture. The concierge who had seen a stranger at the entrance. A specific substance in the coffee residue that could only be purchased at 3 locations in the country. And at one of those locations, it had been purchased 2 months before Lane's death, in cash, without a receipt. The salesperson remembered the buyer. Tall, calm, with a habit of speaking slowly. There was no direct physical evidence linking Sellers to the thermos. No fingerprints. He had worked with gloves. No witnesses who had seen him in the apartment. No camera in the entrance hall of Lane's building. But there was a body of circumstantial evidence. And there was a motive. Documented. Specific. 3 years old. At the first interrogation following his arrest, Sellers asked only one thing. How did you find the substance? Standard screenings don't pick it up. Kane answered, a detective who didn't close the case. Sellers nodded, as if that were the only answer he would have accepted. Did he know I did it? Asked Sellers. At the end, when he realized. I don't know. I don't either. A pause. 1 second. It was important to me that he knew. He said nothing more. 3 mistakes. Kane broke them down afterward, after the verdict. The first, the note. Was thinking of you. Glad you're doing well. M. Without it, just an empty box in the trash. Nobody searches trash. The note turned garbage into a lead. The second, the train. The poison was already in the thermos. The victim would have died without him. But he got on that car. The camera captured his silhouette. 3 people recognized him by his posture. Without that, no recording, no witnesses, case closed within a week. The third, the phrase. You know what this is for. The conductor heard it at 11:52 p.m. and didn't think anything of it. 3 weeks later, that phrase fell into place as the final piece. The train departed at 11:14 p.m. The thermos stood on the table. The coffee was hot.